On 3/21, and as usual we're starting late. I put my camera in backwards. That's not as usual. I have to change it around. But here is who's in the audience. There's lots of news media. There's Brian McIntyre. And there's Diebold. There is Diebold and Rosenthal Rico from the Greater Cleveland Voter Coalition and the League of Women Voters. Back there we have Michael Booth sitting with Mr. Wilkins. Mr. Wilkins is going to be giving a report today, or he's on the agenda too. We have, again, a lot of news media. We have employees in the back row. There's Kurt Miller. Here's Ray Rosenberg.
Yes.
Right there. My fellow in memory card finding, who really gets what's going on here. We have Gladys Harrison representing the Secretary of State's office. We have Kurt and Raj.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have going to deviate a little bit from the agenda this morning, and I have an opening statement to make that I'm making as the chairman of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. It has to do with the recent sentencing of our two board employees to 18 months in the Marysville prison. My comments today will be a little out of character for me. I've always tried to work with my political opponents when I served in government office. I believe that there's a time to campaign and there's a time to govern. And the work of this board is the work of governing. But this board is faced with many challenges in its efforts to restore public confidence in our elections. And here's the situation that we are in today. Two fine, decent women from our staff, Jackie Maiden and Kathleen Dreamer, were sentenced to 18 months in Marysville prison for an incident that could have been corrected well before it resulted in a trial, conviction, and a very harsh sentence. This horrible punishment is being thrown at two people because of the actions or the inactions of one of their co-workers and an advisor who acted out of their own interest and not the common interest. Today I intend to take steps to put the blame and consequences, as meager as those consequences are, where they belong. Francis Lally was an executive assistant to the director of the Board of Elections. He witnessed on December the 13th, 2004, something that he thought would be a problem with the recount procedure. Yet, by his own testimony, he did not tell the director or the deputy director or any member of this board of his concern. If he had, the problem could have been addressed, actions in question stopped, and no alleged crime would have been committed. Because of Mr. Lally's action, or lack of action, Jackie Maiden and Kathy Dreamer face 18 months in the Marysville prison. I am requesting that a letter of reprimand for this failure to perform his duties be placed in Mr. Lalley's personnel file. It is my intention that Mr. Lalley's superiors at the Cleveland Fire Department and the mayor's office receive a copy of that letter as an indication of Mr. Lalley's lack of respect for the chain of command. And I can tell you that Mr. Lalley's days of landing at the Board of Elections, whenever he's laid off of his other public employment, are over as long as I have anything to say about it. Rini Ordini is the legal counsel to the Board of Elections. Mr. Lalley did, by his own testimony, tell Mr. Ordini on December the 17th, 2004, that he was concerned about the way the staff was preparing for the recount. What did Mr. Ordini, the board's legal counsel, do? Nothing. He did nothing. By his own testimony, Mr. Ordini did not tell the director, the deputy director, or the persons in charge of the recount, or any board member until after the December the 22nd, 2004 meeting at which the recount results were certified by this board. So our lawyer knew of a potential legal problem for 5 days and did not advise his client, this Board of Elections. Then Mr. Ordini's office prosecuted the very same employees for actions he could have advised us to correct before the recount certification. Had Mr. Ordini informed his client, the board could have redone the process and not repeated the procedures that Mr. Ordini thought was improper. It would have been as simple as that. A redo, because our attorney advises that he thought that a procedural mistake was made in the original job. As a result of Mr. Ordini's action or inaction, Jackie Maiden and Kathy Dreamer have been sentenced to 18 months in the Marysville prison. As chairman of this board, I think that Mr. Ordini's actions or inactions are violations of the Code of Professional Conduct for attorneys. I'm requesting a review of Mr. Ordini's conduct by the Disciplinary Council of the Supreme Court of Ohio. Further, I am requesting that the review be conducted by a committee of attorneys whose main practice is outside of northeastern Ohio to even avoid the appearance of intimidation from Mr. Ordini's office. I'm also asking the county prosecutor to, at the very least, place a letter of reprimand in Mr. Ordini's personnel file. In addition, I'm informing the county prosecutor that I no longer have confidence in Mr. Ordini's representation of this board, and I'm requesting that the prosecutor assign another attorney to represent the board. And in the interest of complete disclosure, as chairman of the Board of Elections, I am now reporting to this board that I am continuing to review the actions of the county prosecutor's offices in this matter, and I may ask the disciplinary council to initiate further actions. For example, yesterday, I learned from a reporter that the prosecutor has initiated another investigation on March the 13th and has not yet informed members of this board or the director. Prosecutor Mason says I am defending criminals. No, Mr. Mason, I am not defending I am defending two working people who would never have had criminal charges brought against them if your office had properly advised its client, this board. There's one other matter that I want to take up. Candace Hope was appointed as an impartial monitor of the board's performance in elections. Her appointment was made over my objection so that the board would have an impartial and knowledgeable member of the community overseeing all aspects of our election conduct. She has repeatedly represented herself to this board as an impartial observer. This representation is not true. As a result of testimony in the trial of the two board staff members who have been sentenced to the Marysville prison, I learned for the first time that Ms. Hope served with the Kerry Edwards campaign in a capacity of training and advising it on procedures to challenge the board in its conduct of the 2004 election and the subsequent recount. I further learned in that court testimony that Ms. Hope's husband, George Taylor, served as a legal advisor to the Kerry Edwards Democratic ticket in 2004. I also learned that Mr. Taylor was the legal advisor to witnesses representing the Democratic presidential ticket at the recount. Ms. Hope did not inform the board of her position in the Kerry Edwards campaign or her husband's position in the Kerry Edwards campaign at any time during the consideration of her services as an impartial monitor. Now, my definition of impartial does not include a woman and her husband whose joint purpose it is to find flaws in the board's conduct of elections for the benefit of one party involved in that election. It is important to note here that Ms. Hope's report to this board regarding her work as monitor of the 2006 general election is heavily sprinkled with references to, quote, possible violation of law, unquote. Those references are not accompanied with any evidence of violation of law. They are merely one person's observations. It is now clear to me that these are observations of a person with a partisan purpose. Given the events involving Mr. Lally and Mr. Ordini, it is impossible for me to believe that these charges were made with any other person other than to criminalize more board employees. From this day forward, I will oppose giving the monitor any board access that is not enjoyed by the public at large. Further, I will insist that if she is present in examining any aspect of board or staff conduct, that she be accompanied by a Democrat and a Republican representative of the board. And I will retreat her reports to this board with the respect due matters brought to this board by someone representing a political party or committee, while being mindful of the private agenda of such presentations. To be clear, Ms. Hope no longer enjoys a spatial status at this board, nor do I consider her an impartial monitor in any sense of the word. In summary then, I have as chairman of this board laid out steps I am now taking as a result of the treatment of Jackie Maiden and Kathy Dreamer, as well as steps that may result from my continued investigation of this matter. If my colleagues on this board wish to offer resolutions in support of my action, that would be fine. If they do not, that is also fine, and I understand. I plan to continue to serve on this board through February 28, 2010. And I hope that these remarks make it clear what my posture will be throughout that service. The workers of this board deserve no less, and the public deserves to know that the big shots, the lawyers, and the spatial political interests are not going to grind up the people who are doing the public's work at this board. I thank you very much for your indulgence in this matter, and I will now move to the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak, and that is this, what I'd like to say is I have not seen, thank you. I have not seen this material until after I sat down this morning. I saw the booklets, the notebooks being passed out. You make reference throughout the report as the chairman of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. I say to you, Mr. Chairman, that in the fact that this was never given to us, we have never approved this, Mr. Chairman, you cannot speak for the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. This may be a personal matter, and if that's the case, you're entitled to your own feelings on this. But before this could become an action of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, a vote would need to be taken here, and I, for one, would vote against it. So we need to clarify this, that this, unless you can take a vote now for this, you can only speak for yourself personally, not for the Board of Elections.
I'm speaking for myself personally as the chairman of the board of the elections, and I have said that I would appreciate any support. I feel very strongly about this. Somebody has to take care of the employees at this board and the abuse that I think that they've been subjected to by criminal prosecution.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Coates.
like a point of personal privilege, I agree with my colleague, Mr. Soggs, and I'm going one step further. Although it was my intention to continue to serve as a member of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections so that I could complete my efforts to restore confidence in the board and the election process, these events that you just witnessed and the events of the past 24 hours have made it clear to me that that effort can only be completed with new leadership on the board. Therefore, it is my intention to tender my resignation at the end of today's meeting. It is my desire to focus my energies today on the business of providing the staff with the support and resources they need for the May election. I may have more to say at the end of today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Coates.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I first saw this here this morning also, and these are things that I wish that we as a board could have discussed. And, maybe for personal reasons you didn't show this to me, but I do see that there's many things here, and this investigation needs to happen. I will remain on this board, and I have an election to do. For the record, this whole thing is not making me happy, everyone. It's been a mess. But Friday, when I left this agency, I felt like everything was on the right track. I talked to Jane Platten, I talked to all the managers, and I thought, wow, this is great, we're right on our way, and then, this all happened. But this all needs to be resolved really quickly, Mr. Chairman. And, we have an obligation to the voters, and that's it, but I do
Our
not.
first obligation is to the voters
To the
of this
voters,
county.
and that's what
Conduct a fair